Welcome, friends, to this brief introduction to both myself and to my latest book, Winter Solstice. My name is David Calderola. I'm a veteran of 3 different branches of the service, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army Reserve. I'm a middle-class American, like most of you. I had to leave a previous job that I held for a little over 4 years for health reasons. And while I was recuperating, I took the time off to write my recent book, Winter Solstice. Winter Solstice is the first book of what I call the Alaric trilogy. Now, for your immediate information, Alaric is a Germanic name, and it applies to the antagonist of this book as well as to the antagonist of the next 2 books. There are 2 ongoing fears that I've had that have helped cause this book to come into being. One is the fear that we are living in an age of mass production. Movies, songs, books, television shows, they're all being punched out of a cookie cutter mold. They're all being mass produced, sort of in the hope that 1 out of every 50 or 100 will really catch on and be profitable for the producers. I, as an author, don't particularly care to write endless words on countless pages over numerous dozens and dozens of paperbacks or novels, hoping that 1 or 2 will happen to catch on and actually be considered a quality work and might actually make a name for myself. I'm far more interested in quality over quantity. Winter Solstice is only my 3rd book in 12 years. I really don't write unless I have something to write about. And the reason, or the impetus for writing this book, came about from my second fear, which is more serious than the first. And that is, as humanity supposedly progresses, he moves farther and farther away from God, more into atheism, at least secularism, and closer to the devil, whether he knows it or not. God and the devil and heaven and hell are looked upon as myth and mythology. People are turning ever more merely to science and to man's personal, limited knowledge to guide them. Some people are content to put their faith in science because they have no faith in God. They've had no relationship with God. Unfortunately, such people probably had an unhappy relationship with the devil. And so, the purpose of Winter Solstice and the other 2 books of the trilogy as they are written is to try to show how the devil has changed his tactics, how he approaches mankind to maintain his relevancy with mankind, especially over the 20th century. This book is set in 1898 and 1899. The second book will be set in Western Europe over the periods of World War I and World War II. And the 3rd book will take us westward still all the way to America and be set in contemporary times. The 20th century is a very unique century. Many innovations and inventions and discoveries, in fact so many in the 20th century alone that I'm sure they exceeded all the inventions and discoveries of mankind from Adam and Eve to the year 1900, all combined. You don't need to be a sociologist to know that mankind has always struggled to keep up with his own inventions because social and political and cultural changes are always a lot slower in coming than discoveries in science and technology and industry. This particular book, Winter Solstice, concerns a group of 4 friends in England in 1898 who, for personal and professional reasons, decide they want to seek out a manifestation of the supernatural. Unfortunately, their journey takes them to the wilds of Bulgaria, where they find themselves trapped in a hidden and secluded fortress, not knowing that this particular abandoned fortress is also a favorite chamber, a gateway into the earth for the devil. So they find themselves locked into a so secluded fortress that there's no possible hope of help from an outside source. They are locked in with the devil, and they have to find some way to try to extricate themselves, saving their lives, if not also, preferably, their souls. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about by reading to you the back of the book. You and your companions are trapped in an ancient and mysterious fortress, but you are not alone. There's also another one present who walks the darkened halls. He seems to oppose you, though he has not openly regarded you and your friends as an enemy. He is tall, dark, and handsome, very well educated, and much experienced in the ways of life. He may even be considered wise. He speaks to you and at times even sings to you with a deep, beautiful baritone voice. He is charming and charismatic, and one thing more, he is the devil. If you could save your souls by losing your lives, or save your lives by risking your souls, which would you choose? If he has forsworn to answer 33 questions truthfully, what would you ask him? Could you trick the devil? Would you even try? But wait, act quickly, for the solstice is upon you. I always thought that was an interesting proposition, if you indeed met the devil. And, to be fair, we'll make it you and your friends, so that you're not alone. And you could ask him 33 questions. What questions could you choose that would be beneficial for you? What would be your motives in asking certain questions? Do you really think you could defeat the devil? How would he respond? With what kind of deception, even if he had forsworn to be truthful? Even if he could demonstrate it's possible that he could be truthful? I have not written this book like a mass-produced paperback novel meant to be read momentarily and cast aside. Like the 19th century novels, I mean it to be something more profound, more interesting, hopefully more fascinating. The type of book that you'll return to again and again. As an example, very briefly, here's a copy of Bram Stoker's book Dracula that I purchased in 2010. At the time, the story was 113 years old. You'll notice it simply says Dracula at the top and it has the author's name at the bottom. There's no need for commentary. There's no need for recommendations or for fancy artwork. Winter Solstice is the same way, at least I hope it is. The largest print is the title. There is a graphic with a small biblical quotation that's pertinent to the story. There is the explanation that this is the first volume of the Allard trilogy, and the smallest print at the bottom is my name. There are no recommendations on it. There's no fancy artwork. I designed this book myself. I did it because I feel the story will sell itself. At least that's what I intended to. Not on name recognition, not on fancy graphics, not on recommendations of people you may never have even heard of. And therefore, to make the book more interesting, and to give it, hopefully, a greater longevity than the average modern-day paperback, I have generously used verse, poetic verse as well as prose. Each of the chapters starts with 2 verses or 2 stanzas of poetic verse that I like to refer to as a poetic mood music that will try to whet your appetite and get you interested into delving into the proceeding chapter. Those stanzas have a tendency to either mirror exactly what's going to happen within the chapter, or to just sort of foreshadow something that may happen or may begin to happen that will unfold over the following chapters. I use not only poems in the form of obvious poems that you'll see in the form of stanzas, but I have a tendency to also mix poetic verse at times right into the prose. You may come across a fairly large paragraph, only to find out that about halfway through the paragraph, the prose ends and the rest of the paragraph there's actually several rhymes of poetic verse. I do that when I want to capture mood or moment or an emotion. I also employ at times what I call a pseudo-verse. A pseudo-verse is something that cannot truly be called verse because of the disparity of words and syllables between the rhyming words. But I do this to try to trigger just a rhythm in the mind of the reader, to keep the work from becoming monotonous. For instance, this is right from the first chapter. Now, my curious one, do attend, and I shall relate to you as they relate to each other as a friend, this extraordinary story from its confused beginning to a sharply pointed end. Attend, friend, and end all rhyme, and it's almost like a piece of poetic verse, but because of the different number of words and syllables between the rhyming words, it's not true verse. It's meant simply to trigger in the reader's mind a cadence. I try to employ poetic verse whenever it's called for, whenever the mood hit me, that it actually belongs where I'm putting it, not simply as a gimmick or simply to dress up the prose. Let me give you another example. These are the opening quatrains to chapter 9. Now, I understand that you might not understand exactly what it's talking about, because of course I don't want to give away any spoilers, but when you reach this part of the book you'll fully understand. This is the way the quatrains go. In the smithy I feel he has wakened, how hard the hammer falls. The respite from trouble has ended, a return to scheming calls. All hopes for repenting of sins shall ever and ever be lacked. The soul, like a tryst with the devil, desires an unholy pact. No elder that ever had ruled here, no elder who brought forth a son, ever sought to declare him a prince, no matter what battles he won. Yet a boy, the son of a stranger, the source of his father's pride, shall never inherit the title, by the hand of a stranger has died. When I had inserted those verses and started to write the prose of that particular chapter, the words I had chose started to become poetic in themselves, so I tinkered with them, and the first line in the prose, as it presents itself, looking as if it's merely the start of a paragraph, goes this way. By the groaning of creaking boards, by the progress of evil moving towards, the crypt where corpses asleep are found, shall revenge awake and malevolence abound. Boldly and doggedly does Alec, and it just goes right back into the prose. It's contained within the paragraph, it's not a separate line. When the time comes, whenever the mood strikes me that a poetic verse might be called for, I resorted to it. They are embedded within the paragraphs. It's almost a challenge to try to find them, because I have had some people go right over a poetic verse and not realize they've done so. There are many things in this book, I like to consider it as a multi-layered work, that you're not going to catch the first time you read it. I do this intentionally, not to confuse you or to disappoint you. There are a number of things you will catch. I do that in the hopes that in a few years, if you decide to come back to the book and read the story again, there may be one or two things that you caught the first time you read the book that you won't notice. But there may be 2 or 3 or 4 things you didn't catch the first time that you'll catch on the second reading. And possibly something new on the third or the fourth, a new perception or new understanding of why something was put in the book the way it was. I'm hoping, like Bram Stoker's Dracula, that this book will survive me by decades, if not generations. I want a quality work, not a work merely of mass-produced quantity. I hope you'll give my book a read, and I'm hoping that you will give me a fair review on the internet, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or whatever website you choose to employ that caters to the readers offering reviews for books they have read. An honest and fair review. I am as interested in intelligent criticism as I am in praise. I hope you'll give my book a read. I hope you'll be patient with it. It's not a paperback. It's not just something that you can read quickly, the words go in one ear and out the other. It helps to look at what you're reading. I mean, really look it over, think about it. The more you think about it, the more you ponder it, the more you'll get out of the book. And as I said, I hope it will present for you not merely an interesting reading experience, but may at times even fascinate you. Well, thank you for being with me. I'm going to add an email address at the end of this video, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions about myself or about my book or about any of my future YouTube videos that I plan on releasing shortly. Thank you.